Part 2, Flamingo, the last lesson. Usually, when school began, there was a great bustle which could be heard out in the street. The opening and closing of desks, the lessons repeated in unison, very loud, with our hands over our ears to understand better, and the teacher's great ruler rapping on the table. But now it was all so still. I had counted on the commotion to get to my desk without being seen. But of course, that day everything had to be as quiet as Sunday morning. Through the window, I saw my classmates already in their places and M. Hamel walking up and down with his terrible iron ruler under his arm. I had to open the door and go in before everybody. You can imagine how I blushed and how frightened I was. Now, what Franz does, Franz describes the usual scene that occurs at the school in the mornings. And how he describes the scene? He used to see a lot of noise created by moving of desks, children repeating their lessons, and teachers striking the table with the rulers. All these sounds could be heard. Okay, but on that day, what was unusual? The unusual thing was all these things were not happening. There was no such sound coming out of the school, and it seemed that the school was closed as it used to be on Sunday morning. Now, why he describes that day as Sunday morning? Because on Sunday we do not have classes, and since there used to be a pin drop silence, and that was the case on that day, he couldn't hear any kind of sound. Franz had a plan that what he would do, he would take a cover, that is, he will escape behind the sounds that would be created by tables commotion, or the children repeating the lessons after their teachers. So all these sounds created, he would escape behind all this sound and nobody would see him, and doing all this he would reach the class. But this plan seemed to be impossible. Why? Because that day all these things were not happening. Okay, now Franz, what did he do? He peeped inside his class and he saw that his classmates were already seated, and his teacher, Mr. M. Hamel, was walking in the class with his ruler made up of iron, and that iron ruler was placed under his arm. So he could see a scene that he was very much scared of. He thought that Mr. M. Hamel might be angry that Franz is late for the school, so he may get a good beating from his teacher. Okay. Also, he was very much ashamed. Who was ashamed? Franz was ashamed. Why? Because he was very much late for the school, and he thought that now he may get a scolding. Okay. Now let's see what next paragraph says. But nothing happened. M. Hamel saw me and said very kindly, "Go to your place quickly, little Franz. We were beginning without you." But what happened? Franz was very much surprised to hear that instead of getting a good scolding from Mr. M. Hamel, his teacher said very much kindly to him that Franz, go to your seat and be seated, as we were going to begin the class without you. Okay, so he did not plan all this. He thought that he will be getting a scolding. So since his teacher was very much polite to him, he was very much surprised after hearing this polite statements from his teacher. Okay, I jumped over the bench and sat down at my desk. Not till then, when I had got a little over my fright, did I see that our teacher had on his beautiful green coat, his frilled shirt, and the little black silk cap, all embroidered, that he never wore except on inspection and prize days. Besides, the whole school seemed so strange and solemn. But the thing that surprised me most was to see on the back benches that were always empty the village people sitting quietly like ourselves. Old Hoser, with his three cornered hat, the former mayor, the former postmaster, and several others besides. Everybody looked sad, and Hoser had brought an old primer thumbed at the edges, and he held it open on his knees with his great spectacles lying across the pages. Now, what he did? Franz was very much surprised. So what he did? He hurried to his seat. Okay, he was out of his surprisement. What he did? He hurried to the seat, and after some time, after being seated to his seat, after some time, he overcame the scare that he had in his mind that he will be getting scolded, but he didn't get. So he overcame his scare, and after he was very much comfortable, he noticed that the teacher had worn his best embroidered dress, and this dress was very much special for Mr. M. Hamill. Why? Because he didn't wore that dress on normal days. He used to wear that dress only on special occasions like inspection days or prize distribution days. Okay, so now Franz, he thought that if that day was normal day, then what could be the reason for Mr. M. Hamill to wear his special dress? So, besides all this thing, Franz felt that the atmosphere of the school was little unusual and kind of serious also. So, besides all this, he also noticed that the last benches of his classroom, which were always kept vacant by the students, that day the last benches were not vacant. That day the last benches were occupied by the senior village men. And who were the senior village men? Mr. Hoser, who was wearing his three cornered hat, was also there in the class. The retired mayor was there in the class. The postmaster also came, and rest of the village people were also there. Okay, and also they were very much sad. Everybody sitting in the class seemed a little sad. Hoser has also brought his reader, which was old and torn. He opened it and he kept it on his knees and had placed his spectacles on it. Okay, next paragraph. While I was wondering about it, Mr. M. Hamill mounted his chair and, in the same grave and gentle tone which he had used to me, said, "My children, this is the last lesson I shall give you. The order has come from Berlin to teach only German in the schools of Alsace and Lorraine. The new master comes tomorrow. This is your last French lesson. I want you to be very attentive." Now Franz was confused and he couldn't figure out what was happening that day. Just then, Mr. M. Hamill told them that it was their last lesson in French. Why? Because as the Prussians in Berlin had ordered that French language would no longer be taught in the schools of Alsace and Lorraine, and that German language will be taught instead of French language. So the next day, next day, the German teacher would arrive, and as this was the last lesson in French, so his teacher, Mr. M. Hamill, wanted that everybody should pay attention to the lesson. Okay. What a thunderclap these words were to me! Oh, the wretches! That was what they had put up at the town hall. My last French lesson. Why, I hardly knew how to write. I should never learn any more. I must stop there, then. Oh, how sorry I was for not learning my lessons, for seeking birds' eggs, or going sliding on the Sar. My books that had seemed such a nuisance a while ago, so heavy to carry, my grammar and my history of the saints were all friends. Now that I couldn't give up, and M. Hamel too, the idea that he was going away, that I should never see him again, made me forget all about his ruler and now how cranky he was. Now, Franz was shocked to know that he could not learn French any longer, and now, now he knew that the latest news that had been put up on the bulletin board of the town hall was about the French classes being stopped and German language to be taught from the next day. Okay. Now Franz, what he did, he started regretting. Okay, what he regretted? He regretted for not being serious towards his studies and always wasting his time in hunting birds' eggs and playing with the Saar River. Now his books, till now Franz considered his books to be an unwanted burden, but suddenly what happened is that unwanted book, that unwanted burden turned into his friends. He started considering them to be his best friends whom he would never leave. In this paragraph, the narrator is trying to show that there is a change in the attitude of this little boy Franz towards study after hearing the news that he could not learn French any longer. Okay. Now M. Hamel too also was going. Okay, the news that their teacher M. Hamel was leaving was also like a similar impact on him. Similar impact is in, like, he did not wanted his M. Hamel teacher to go. He did not wanted his teacher to stop teaching. He wanted his teacher to teach more. Okay, because all of a sudden he started loving his teacher and the books. Franz did not at all wanted his teacher to go away. He no longer had those bad ideas about his teacher. He no longer thought the teacher to be short or short tempered or like strict, or he did not wanted his teacher to go away from him, and he wanted his teacher to continue teaching him. Okay. Poor man. It was in honor of this last lesson that he had put on his fine Sunday clothes, and now I understood why the old men of villages were sitting there in the back of the room. It was because they were very sorry too that they had not gone to school anymore. It was their way of thanking our Master for his 40 years of faithful service and of showing their respect for the country that was theirs no more. Now, Franz recapitulated. He thought that now Franz knew that M. Hamel was wearing his best dress in honor of this last lesson. He, as already told, that he wear his dress on special day only. So he was wondering what was the special thing today, why he is wearing his special dress today. So now he understood why he was wearing his special dress today. He was wearing his special dress in honor of this last lesson. Okay. He also realized that the village men had came to pay respect and thank Mr. M. Hamill for his service of 40 years in that school. The village men had come to the class as they were also repenting, like they were regretting for not having for not studying well in their childhood, and they had also come to thank their teacher for his 40 years of service as teacher of French language. Also, they wanted to show respect to their country, and were very sad as their mother tongue, that is French, would no longer be taught to them. Okay, next paragraph. While I was thinking of all these, I heard my name called. It was my turn to recite. What would I not have given to be able to say that dreadful rule for the participle all through, very loud and clear, and without one mistake? But I got mixed up, and I got mixed up on the first words and stood there, holding on to my desk, my heart beating and not daring to look up. Now what happened, that he was thinking, the teacher called, while he was thinking all these things, the teacher called his name. Okay, why the teacher called his name? The teacher called Franz as it was his turn to recite the topic of participles. Okay, so as the news had impacted already Franz, he was eager to study, and he was so much interested to study more. So he was desperate to show his eagerness. He wanted to be able to recite the topic in a one go and without any mistake, and please his teacher, so that his teacher may not leave, or in honor of this last lesson he wanted to make his teacher happy by showing this respect towards his teacher. This desperation is reflected in his willingness to give away all that he had in return for reciting the last lesson well. As Franz did not know the lesson, he got very much confused and stood quietly. His heart was beating very fast because he was very much nervous, as he was ashamed of himself and did not have the courage to face his teacher. Okay. I heard M. Hamill say to me, I won't scold you, little Franz. You must feel bad enough. See how it is. Every day we have said to ourselves, Bah, I have plenty of time. I will learn it tomorrow. And now you see where we have come out. Ah, that's the great trouble with Alsace. She puts off learning till tomorrow. Now those fellows out there will have the right to say to you, how is it you pretend to be Frenchmen and yet you can neither speak nor write your own language? But you are not the worst, poor little Franz. We have all a great deal to reproach ourselves with. Now, since he was very much eager to show his respect to his teacher, and wanted to recite that chapter, but he did not know anything about it, so he got confused, and he stood there quietly, feeling ashamed about himself. So the teacher, the French teacher of France, that is Mr. M. Hamill, said to Franz that he would not scold him, as now he had realized his mistake. Every day what Franz told himself during his classes, that he would study the next day, and now the opportunity to study had ended and he knew nothing. Okay, he used to delay that he will be today he will enjoy and the next day he would study, but all these making all this delay brought him to this day that on this day also he did not know anything about his lessons. M. Hamel now says that all the people of Alsace were to be blamed, not only France to be blamed, but all the people of Alsace to be blamed. Why? Because they were not serious towards the learning, they were not serious about studying. He also tells the class that the enemies, that is Prussians, would laugh at them. Why would they laugh? They would laugh on them, saying that they only show to be Frenchmen. They just merely show that they are Frenchmen, and they can neither speak nor write their own language. Okay, so how what kind of French are they when they don't know their own language? What kind of French people they are? And who will say this? The enemy, that is the Prussians, would say the French people once German language will be started in the school. So he says that France should not feel guilty as everyone is in fault. Okay. Your parents were not anxious enough to have you learn. They preferred to put you to work on a farm or at the mills so as to have a little more money. And I have been to blame also. Have I not often sent you to water my flowers instead of learning your lessons? And when I wanted to go fishing, did I not just give you a holiday? So now what M. Hamel says that M. Hamel says that France is not the only person to be blamed for not knowing his lessons. There are many people playing a role of culprit for the result what France is showing, and who are to be blamed? All the people of Alsace, including Mr. M. Hamel and also his parents. Now, why Mr. M. Hamel blames France's parents? He blames France's parents were not interested in getting him educated. What they wanted him to work. Him means they wanted France to work at a farm or at any mill so that he could earn some money. And he also says that as a teacher, as a French teacher, he was also not interested in teaching them. He would send them to his home to water plants, or sometimes he would declare a holiday and go for a fishing. Okay, so what M. Hamel realized that this is not the only one person who is in blame. Everybody, including his parents as well as he himself, that is Mr. M. Hamel, is the person.